Mr. Grin. Written by S.C. Nevison. The Woodward Manor sat on the outskirts of Bracken Hollow, an old house with too many rooms and not enough light. Wind always seemed to whisper through the corridors, even when every window was shut. The walls remembered things there, laughter, arguments, maybe even whispers that didn't belong to anyone alive. Georgia Woodward, age 16, hated it. She hated how her parents insisted on calling it a heritage. To her, it was just cold and old and way too quiet. She'd rather be anywhere else, at Violet's house in town, or down by the old mill where she and her friends smoked behind the stone wall. But ever since her father Mark's antiques obsession had started, her weekends were filled with family time, meaning long drives to dusty shops that smelled of rot and furniture polish. Chapter 1. Arrival. That Friday evening, rain slicked the cobblestones as Mark's car pulled into the drive. Georgia and her younger brother Ethan helped unload boxes of brass trinkets and chipped photo frames, the kind of stuff Mark swore would be worth something someday. Then he carried in a long, narrow wooden case. The hinges were rusted. The clasps looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. "What's that?" Georgia asked, frowning. Mark grinned like a boy hiding a secret. "Something special. Haven't seen one like it since I was your age." Vicky, their mother, looked up from the kitchen doorway, drying her hands. "Mark, tell me that's not another puppet or mask." "Not just any puppet," he said proudly, setting the case on the dining table. "This one's a piece of craftsmanship." He unlatched the box with a slow click. The lid creaked open. Inside lay a ventriloquist doll, roughly 2 feet tall, dressed in a faded black suit. Its porcelain face was fractured along the left cheek, the cracks branching like lightning through the paint. Its grin was wide, fixed, and just a little too human. One glass eye was slightly clouded, as if it had seen too much. Georgia leaned closer, despite herself. "What's wrong with its ugly face?" "Just old," Mark said, brushing dust off its shoulder. "It's called Mr. Grin. Look, there's even a label." He turned the doll slightly, showing a cracked ivory tag pinned to its lapel. The handwritten ink had faded, but the name was still legible. Mr. Grin. Ethan stepped back until he hit Vicky's leg. "I don't like it, Mom. It's looking at me." "It's not alive, sweetheart," Vicky said softly, though her tone wasn't convincing. She had gone a little pale herself. "Mark, please. This thing gives me the creeps." Mark laughed, the sound echoing off the high ceiling. "You two are too quickly spooked. It's a piece of history, that's all. Someone's art." He propped the doll up at the end of the dining table, straightening its tiny tie. "Look at that craftsmanship. You can almost imagine it talking." "Yeah," Georgia muttered. "That's kind of the problem." He just rolled his eyes at them, then went to unpack more boxes. Later that evening. After dinner, the rain had thickened into a steady downpour. The wind pressed against the windows like something trying to get in. Mark sat in his study with a drink, polishing the doll's wooden hands with an old cloth, humming softly to himself. Vicky passed by the doorway and stopped. "Are you seriously sitting alone with that thing?" Mark chuckled without looking up. "It's harmless, Vic. I'm just cleaning it up. It's probably worth a small fortune." "You said that about the gramophone that doesn't even play," she said, folding her arms. "I mean it, Mark. That doll gives me a bad feeling." He looked up finally, smiling. "You always think my hobbies are cursed." "Maybe because your hobbies keep ending up in our living room," she said. "You should have seen Ethan at dinner. He could barely look at it." Mark sighed, running a thumb over one of the cracks on the doll's face. "You're all being ridiculous. It's just a doll." Vicky stared a moment longer, then shook her head. "Fine, but if that thing starts walking around, don't expect me to be sticking around." Mark laughed again, but when she turned to leave, his smile faded. The candlelight caught Mr. Grin's face, and for just a heartbeat, Mark could have sworn the grin was wider. Upstairs, Georgia sat cross-legged on her bed, phone glowing in her hands. Messages bouncing back and forth endlessly. Violet, so what did your dad drag home this time? Georgia, some busted ventriloquist doll. Looks like it crawled out of a nightmare. Violet, creepy. Bet it's haunted. Georgia, if it is, maybe it'll take him first. She smirked and tossed her phone aside, the kind of half-joke that came too easy in that house. The manor groaned as if it heard her. From downstairs came the faint sound of her father laughing, and then silence. Chapter 2. First Impressions. Thunder rolled. The lights flickered. A draft was blowing in, causing a shiver. When Georgia got up to close her window, she caught a reflection in the glass, something small and pale on the landing. She spun around, almost sliding off the bed. The hallway was empty. "Ethan?" she called. There was no answer. Just the steady patter of rain, and somewhere below, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like wooden fingers brushing against the floorboards. Georgia crept down the hall, every step creaking beneath her bare feet. The tapping was faint but rhythmic, like fingernails brushing wood. 2 beats, then silence. 2 beats, then silence again. She stopped outside Ethan's room, her phone flashlight trembling. "Ethan?" she whispered. No answer. She pushed the door open slowly. Her brother sat cross-legged on the floor in the dim glow of his bedside lamp, surrounded by a scatter of old superhero figures, chipped Batman, cracked Spider-Man, a Superman missing one arm. He looked up, startled. "You scared me?" "I scared you," she hissed. "What are you doing awake?" "Couldn't sleep." "Dad said I could look through his old toys," he said, clutching a faded plastic cape. "Why are you creeping around?" She glanced around the room, her nerves still humming. I don't know, something tapping. Like footsteps. Ethan frowned. "Did you check downstairs?" "No," she forced a laugh. "Because I'm not an idiot in a horror movie." Ethan smirked. "You're still scared." "Yeah, not as scared as you were when you saw that doll. Just go to bed, okay?" He nodded reluctantly. "Night, Georgie." "Don't call me that," she muttered, but smiled faintly and closed the door. The hallway stretched ahead, shadows pooling where the old light bulb flickered. She hesitated, holding her breath. There it was again, tap, 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 from downstairs, like something small moving across the wooden floor, dragging its weight. Georgia took a step toward the stairs. The sound stopped. She strained to listen, but all was silent. Then a faint click like a latch. She stood perfectly still, staring into the dark. "Dad?" she called quietly. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She edged toward the banister, leaning just enough to peer down. The hallway below was swallowed in darkness, except for one faint glint. The mantel mirror caught a sliver of moonlight from the window, and for a split second, she thought she saw something sitting upright on the floor. Small, pale, unmoving. Her stomach twisted, but when she blinked, it was gone. She swallowed hard and backed away. "Screw this!" she muttered, hurrying back to her room and slamming the door. That was enough investigations for her. Later that night. It was 12:47 a.m. Rain whispered against the windows again, soft and steady. Georgia sat on her bed, face lit by her phone screen, trying to laugh it off. "Violet, you sound paranoid? What did you hear exactly?" Georgia. Tapping, like someone walking slow. "Checked Ethan's room. Wasn't him." Ariana. "Bet your dad's doll moved. Creepy little thing." Elise. "Don't joke, Ari. Stuff like that happens." Violet. LOL. Possessed puppets? Come on, Georgia. It's just weird, okay? Every time I hear it, it stops. Like it knows I'm listening. A typing bubble appeared from Violet. Then, Violet. Okay, that's actually kind of freaky. Maybe the house is shifting. Wind? Pipes? Georgia. Yeah, maybe. She tossed the phone aside, rubbing her temples. Her room felt smaller than usual, the air heavier. Then came the sound again. Not from the hall this time, from below. A dragging scrape, slow and deliberate, followed by a hollow knock. Georgia froze, eyes wide. Her phone buzzed, a new message lighting the screen. Elise? You still there? Georgia. Yeah, hold on. Thought I heard. She started typing, then stopped. A floorboard creaked right outside her room. Her breath caught. Every instinct screamed, "Don't open the door." But curiosity or stubbornness won over. She crept over and eased it open, the hinges whining. The landing was empty, just the dim orange glow from the hallway lamp. Her father's study door stood ajar downstairs, its light still on. "Dad?" she whispered. A moment later, footsteps, heavier this time, moved in the corridor below. "Georgia?" Her father's muffled voice called out. She nearly laughed with relief. "Yeah, sorry. I thought I heard something." Mark appeared at the bottom of the stairs in his dressing gown, rubbing his eyes. "It's late, sweetheart. Don't stay up messaging all night." "Sorry," she said. He smiled tiredly. "House like this creaks. You'll get used to it." "Yeah," she muttered. "Sure." He gave her a reassuring nod, turned off the downstairs light, and headed to bed. Georgia lingered a moment, listening to the sound of his door closing. For a while, there was only silence. Then when she turned back toward her room, she thought she heard faint laughter, high-pitched, distant, and wooden, echoing, like on a horror movie. She spun around. Nothing, just the thrum of her heartbeat and silence. Quickly closing her door, she jumped into bed, but it took a while for her to stop listening for noises and sleep. Chapter 3. The Chair by the Window. The next morning she looked wrecked. Dark circles under her eyes, hair half-brushed, snapping at Ethan when he teased her for fighting ghosts all night. At school, Violet caught her by the lockers. "Jesus, gee, you look like you haven't slept in a week." "Didn't much," Georgia muttered. "What happened?" Elise asked quietly. Georgia hesitated. It wasn't just creaking. Something was moving downstairs, like someone dragging furniture or a doll walking around, Ariana said with a grin. Georgia shot her a glare. "I'm serious. It didn't sound like my dad." Violet leaned against the lockers. "Then tonight, same spot. Woods behind the mill. Bring smokes, and you can tell us your spooky bedtime story properly." "Fine by me," Georgia said, forcing a grin. "I need a break from that house." "See you tonight," Violet said, tapping her shoulder. "You're starting to sound like a horror podcast." She was actually thinking about it. The sun had already started dipping when Georgia got home from school. The house loomed gray against the low clouds, the windows catching dull streaks of light. Inside, the air felt still, heavier somehow. The faint smell of polish lingered, mixed with something older, like dust and damp wood. She dropped her bag in the hall. "Mom? Dad? I'm back!" There was no answer. The house was silent. "Ethan?" Nothing but silence. The kind of silence that filled every corner until you could almost hear it breathing. She moved toward her father's study, the door half open. "Dad, you home?" The room was neat, unnaturally so. Her father's papers were stacked perfectly, his glass of whiskey half full beside the armchair. But it wasn't the tidy desk or the smell of stale smoke that made her stop. It was the doll. Mr. Grin was no longer on the mantel. He now sat upright in an old wooden rocking chair by the window, in her father's favorite seat, positioned to face the garden. The late afternoon light slanted across his cracked face, deepening the lines around his grin. His cloudy glass eyes caught the sun, turning them almost lifelike. Georgia froze in the doorway. "You've got to be kidding me." The chair rocked slightly when she spoke, just once. She swallowed hard, watching for any sign of wind. The window was closed and she couldn't feel one. "Dad, this isn't funny," she called, but there was still no reply. After a long moment, she stepped closer, the floorboards creaking under her weight. The doll's painted lips were split at the corners, the cracks spreading wider than she remembered. Its tilted head seemed to follow her as she circled the chair. "Creepy little freak," she muttered under her breath. The house seemed to listen. Suddenly, a gust stirred the curtains. The chair gave a faint creak, rocking forward an inch. Georgia jerked back. "Nope, not today." She turned, grabbed her bag, and bolted upstairs, leaving the study door swinging open behind her. A weak sun hung low over Bracken Hollow when she arrived, shining through the thin branches of the trees behind the old mill. This was their spot, hidden from the road, half overgrown, a place that smelled of wet leaves and cigarette smoke. Violet was already there, perched on the stone wall with her boots kicked up. Ariana leaned against a tree, scrolling through her phone, and Elise was sitting cross-legged on the grass, chewing on a straw and looking nervous, as usual. Georgia dropped her bag beside them. "You will not believe what my dad did." Violet raised a brow. "Brought home another cursed antique?" "Worse," Georgia said. "That doll, Mr. Grin." He moved it again. "It's in his rocking chair now, looking out the window." Ariana grinned. "Maybe it wanted a better view of you coming home." Elise shivered. "Don't even joke, Ari. Dolls creep me out." "I'm serious," Georgia said. "It was in his study window, just staring outside, like it was watching for something." "Maybe it is watching you," came a drawl from behind her. They all turned. It was Charlie, leaning against his bike at the edge of the clearing, cigarette between his fingers, and a smirk on his face. His dark hair fell in his eyes, messy, deliberate. He was a year older, always in trouble, always late. "Didn't know you invited him," Georgia said flatly. "I didn't," Violet said, smirking. "He just shows up like mold." Charlie flicked his ash onto the grass. "Heard the ghost stories from the Woodward Manor. Thought I'd see if the rumors were true." "There's no rumors," Georgia snapped. "Just my dad being weird." Charlie tilted his head. "And a doll that moves by itself?" He gave a low whistle. "Classic. Maybe it's trying to find a new daddy." Violet snorted, trying not to laugh. Ariana outright cackled. Elise just looked uncomfortable. Georgia crossed her arms. "You're an idiot." Charlie grinned. "Yeah, but at least I'm not scared of a puppet." "I'm not scared," she said, stepping closer, annoyed. "I just don't like ugly things that don't stay put." He leaned in slightly, smirk softening. "Sounds like you've got control issues." Her jaw clenched. "Sounds like you've got a death wish." Violet broke the tension with a laugh. "Okay, calm down, both of you. It's too early for a murder." Georgia turned away, grabbing her bag. "I'm done with this." "Oh, come on," Charlie called after her. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt the puppet's feelings." She didn't look back. "Go smoke your lungs out, Charlie," she muttered. "At least that'll shut you up." Violet started to follow, but Georgia waved her off. "I'm fine. I just need to get out of here." By the time she reached the edge of the woods, the sun had disappeared behind the trees. The air felt colder, sharper. Every sound carried too far. The wind, the rustle of dry leaves, the faint scrape of her own boots on the path. She kept glancing back, half expecting to see someone behind her. But there was nothing, only the empty road leading back toward the mill. When she reached the gate, the sky had gone a violet gray. The house loomed quietly, too quiet. Inside, the lights were off. Her mother's car was gone, and there was no sound from Ethan's room. But from down the hall came a soft, unmistakable creak. The sound of the rocking chair moving. Back and forth, back and forth. Georgia walked up to her father's study and stood frozen in the doorway. The doll sat exactly where she'd left it, only now its cracked jaw hung slightly open, and the chair was still moving. Slowly, steadily, like it had never stopped. Moving on its own, back and forth, back and forth. The faint creak of wood against wood filled the study like a whisper. Georgia stood, eyes wide, every muscle tight. The doll's cracked grin caught the dim light from the hallway, shadows deepening around its eyes. She could see its reflection in the glass window, a distorted twin swaying with each slow rock. Then, behind her, Georgia? Her mother's voice broke the silence. Vicky stepped in first, flicking on the light. Mark followed close behind, still in his work jacket. The moment the switch clicked, the chair stopped, dead still. Georgia turned with a jerk, startled. "Did you see that? It was moving." Mark frowned. What was moving? That chair? It was rocking. They both looked. The chair stood perfectly still. The doll slumped slightly forward in its seat. The air felt too calm, like the moment after thunder. Vicky rubbed her temples. "You've been scaring yourself, honey. You're overtired." "No, it was moving before you came in." Mark gave a soft laugh. "Really? I swear it was moving." "It's by the window. Probably the wind. These old houses creak and shift all the time." "But the window's shut," Georgia stated. "Then it's the floorboards. Don't work yourself up about it, Georgie." "Stop calling me that," she snapped, her face flushing. Mark's smile faltered. "All right, enough attitude. Go get some sleep." "I'm not making it up," she said, voice sharp, trembling just enough to give her away. Vicky stepped closer, putting a hand on her arm. "You've had a long week. Tomorrow's Saturday. Sleep in, okay?" She looked back at the doll. Mr. Grin sat motionless, the cracks on its cheek like spider webs. Its eyes caught the lamplight, glassy and blank. "Fine," she muttered, turning for the stairs. "Whatever. I'll sleep, but it did move." She stormed up to her room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the mirror. Her heart still hammered as she kicked off her boots and collapsed onto the bed. The house settled around her, groaning with the night wind, but even as she stared up at the ceiling, she couldn't shake it. The image of that chair moving, slow and deliberate, like something unseen was sitting there, pushing back and forth. Her parents hadn't seen it, but she had. She knew it hadn't been the wind, and it hadn't been her imagination either. She knew what she'd seen. The rain started again sometime after midnight, tapping gently against the glass like fingernails. Eventually, she drifted into an uneasy sleep, listening to the droplets bouncing off the pane. Chapter 4. Where is Mr. Grin? The digital clock on Georgia's bedside table read 12:03 a.m. when she woke. The house was quiet, save for the faint groan of the wind and the drip of rain from the eaves. Her mouth felt dry, her stomach hollow. She hadn't eaten since dinner. With a low groan, she pushed back the blanket and shuffled toward the bathroom, the floorboards creaking under her feet. The cold hit her as soon as she opened her door. The air in the hall always felt different at night, heavier, older somehow. She brushed her teeth, splashed cold water on her face, and leaned on the sink for a moment, watching her reflection blink back at her through the half-fogged mirror. Then she heard it, a soft sound from downstairs, something shifting, a faint thump, followed by the squeak of a chair leg on the wooden floor. Georgia opened the bathroom door. "Dad?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer. She listened again. The noise came from her father's study, a low scraping movement. Grabbing her phone, she crept down the stairs, each step deliberate, careful. Her reflection wavered in the hallway mirror as she passed, pale and uncertain. The light was still on under the study door. She knocked lightly. "Dad?" The door opened just enough to reveal Mark standing inside, rubbing the back of his neck, his hair mussed. "You're up late," he said. Georgia exhaled, half relieved, half annoyed. "You scared me. What are you doing?" "Just some paperwork," he said vaguely. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd finish some things before bed." She nodded, feeling awkward. "Okay, I'm just grabbing something to eat." "All right," he said, stifling a yawn. "Don't stay up too long." In the kitchen, the house hummed faintly with the sound of the refrigerator. She poured herself a glass of water, grabbed a packet of crisps and a chocolate bar, and leaned against the counter, trying not to think about the creepy doll. She told herself it was just an object, wood, cloth, and paint, nothing else. Still, she caught herself glancing toward the dark hall every few seconds, half expecting to see that cracked face peering out of the shadows. She shook it off and started back up the stairs, balancing the glass in one hand. Halfway up, a voice made her jump. "Georgia?" She looked up. Her dad stood on the hall above, in his dressing gown now, looking bleary-eyed. "Yeah?" she said. "I left the study light on," he said, rubbing his temple. "Would you mind switching it off for me? I'm dead on my feet, love." "Sure," she answered, backing up. He gave a grateful nod and turned toward his bedroom. Georgia sighed and went back down. The house felt quieter as she walked in the study, emptier, the kind of silence that presses on your ears. The light in there spilled a warm glow across the floor. She stepped inside, careful not to look too closely at the rocking chair until she had to. Mr. Grin sat exactly where she'd seen him last, in her father's old chair by the window, hands resting on his tiny wooden knees, head tilted ever so slightly toward the door. The cracks across his porcelain face caught the light like tiny scars. His smile was the same, fixed, frozen, and eerie as hell. "Creepy little bastard," Georgia muttered, flipping the switch. The room plunged into darkness. She turned toward the door and froze. Thump. Quick. Sharp. Like something dropping to the floor. She spun around and flicked the light back on. The chair was empty. The doll was gone. Her heart thudded against her ribs. For a moment, she couldn't get a breath. She scanned the room, under the desk, behind the chair, near the bookcase, every corner. Nothing. The only sound was the faint creak of the floor settling. "Dad?" she whispered. For a second, she considered calling out louder, but she knew it couldn't be him, and she could already picture his tired, dismissive expression. "It's just your imagination, Georgia." Her eyes swept the study one more time. The window was still shut, the curtains barely moved. There was nowhere for it to go, and yet it was gone. She backed out slowly, turned off the light again, and shut the door. The instant the latch clicked, she thought she heard something inside shift, a faint scrape, like wood brushing against wood. She froze, breath held, trembling, listening. Nothing else came. Heart pounding double time, she hurried up the stairs. Her father's door was closed, the light under it gone. She peeked in quietly. He was asleep already, turned away from her, breathing slow and even. "Never mind," she whispered. Georgia closed his door, retreated to her own room, and climbed into bed without turning the lights off. She told herself she'd imagined it, that she was just tired. But as she stared at the ceiling, every sound in the house felt louder, every creak sharper, and somewhere, faintly, deep in the quiet of the house, she thought she heard something small, moving, dragging, scratching, then silence. Georgia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the dim light from her lamp spilling across her blanket. Every few minutes she thought she heard something, the faintest scrape, a sigh of movement from somewhere below. Finally, she sat up, grabbed her phone, and called her bestie. After a few rings, a tired, groggy voice answered. "You do realize it's 1 a.m, right?" "Violet," Georgia whispered. "I can't sleep. It's that stupid doll." There was a short pause, then a low sigh. "You're still on about that thing?" "It's gone," she stated bluntly. That woke Violet up. "Gone? What do you mean, gone? Like, your dad's got rid of it, gone?" "Nope, I went to turn off the light in Dad's study, and it was there, then it was just gone. It was sitting in the chair 1 second. Then I turned the light off, heard something move, and when I looked again, it wasn't there." Violet was quiet for a long minute. "You are sure it wasn't just your dad moving it?" "Nope, he was in bed." "You checked?" "Yes, he was asleep." Violet sighed softly. "Okay, maybe it fell or something?" "I looked everywhere," Georgia hissed, glancing toward her door. "It wasn't on the floor. It wasn't anywhere." "All right, calm down," Violet said, voice steady but curious now. "You've got your phone, right? Go down there. Show me." "What? No way." "FaceTime me." "Come on, G, go down and show me the creepy little freak. If it's there, we'll figure it out. If it's not, well, maybe it really is haunted." Georgia frowned at the screen. "You're not helping." "Come on, you said it yourself, it moved. Don't you want to prove it?" Georgia hesitated, chewing her lip. Then, with a sharp breath, she switched to video call and flipped her camera. "If I get killed by a doll, it's your fault." "Noted," Violet said, smirking faintly through the phone. Georgia crept out into the hallway. The boards were cold under her bare feet, the house darker now. Even the streetlight's glow barely reached through the windows. Her phone light cut a small cone through the dark, just enough to see by. "Be careful," Violet whispered through the speaker. "You look like you're in a horror movie." "Thanks for that, V," Georgia muttered under her breath. She descended the stairs slowly, holding her phone out. The shadows seemed to shift around her with every step, and when she reached the study door, her heart just sank. The chair was empty again. She panned the light slowly across the room. Stacks of papers, desk, shelves, curtains, nothing else. The doll wasn't there. "See?" she whispered, turning the phone toward the rocking chair. "He's gone. I told you." "Maybe your dad took it again," Violet said, but her voice had lost some of its sarcasm. "No, she started, but a noise cut her off. A faint creak from deeper in the house. Georgia froze up, stiff as a board. It came again, the sound of something shifting on wood, like someone stepping on the kitchen table. Her stomach knotted up so tight she almost got cramps. "Violet," she whispered, "there's something in the kitchen." "Go look," Violet whispered back, though her tone wavered on her last word. Georgia swallowed hard, gripping her phone tighter. She moved down the hall, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The kitchen doorway was open just a crack, the darkness inside thick as ink. She reached out with her free hand and nudged the door open. It let out a long, slow squeal. Then she lifted the phone, the camera light trembling across the room. The beam swept over the counter, the sink, the table, and there he was. Mr. Grin. He was just sitting right in the middle of the table, legs dangling over the edge, his cracked grin pointed straight at her, his head tilted just enough to catch the light. His glass eyes shone white and empty. Georgia froze. Her throat closed up. A chill ran up her spine. Her hands began to tremble. Then, "Georgia?" Violet's voice whispered through the phone. That tiny sound made her jump. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. The doll's head snapped forward, as if reacting to the noise. Georgia screamed to the edge of her lungs' capacity and bolted out of the kitchen, up the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering in her chest. She burst onto the hall just as her parents' bedroom door opened. "Georgia, calm down," Vicky shouted, voice alarmed. "What is it? What's wrong?" "It's the doll," she gasped. "It was on the kitchen table. It moved." Mark appeared behind her, rubbing his eyes. "What are you talking about? What's happened?" "I swear it was sitting there just looking at me." They exchanged a tired look. "It's your stupid doll." "So it's your problem," huffed Vicky as she disappeared into their bedroom. "All right," Mark said, trying to sound calm. "Let's go take a look." He followed her downstairs, switching on lights as they went. Georgia pointed toward the kitchen, still shaking. It was there, on the table. But when Mark pushed open the door, the table was empty. Her phone lay on the floor where she'd dropped it, screen still glowing faintly. Nothing else. Mark frowned, picked up the phone, and handed it to her. "You must have imagined it." "I didn't. It was... Come on," he said gently, walking toward the study. "Look!" The study door was half open. He flicked on the light. There, sitting perfectly still in the rocking chair by the window, was Mr. Grin, exactly as before. Same cracked smile, same tilted head. Her mouth went dry. "That's not possible," she whispered. Mark sighed. "Maybe you knocked it earlier. Maybe Ethan moved it. Either way, it's fine now." He gave her a worried look. "Honey, you really need to sleep." Georgia said nothing. She just stared at the doll. The cracks along its face seemed deeper now, the shadows around its mouth darker. When her father turned off the light again, she could have sworn, just for a heartbeat, that the corners of its grin widened. Georgia barely remembered getting back to her room. Her hands were still trembling as she shut the door behind her and leaned against it, breathing hard. The house had gone quiet again, her parents' footsteps retreating to their room. Ethan's muttering sleepily from behind his door ceased. Now only the wind outside broke the silence. She sank onto her bed, staring at her phone. Violet's call was still active. "Violet?" she whispered. A muffled rustle, then her friend's voice came through, shaky. "Jesus, Georgia, what was that?" She swallowed hard. "You saw it, right? You saw it move?" Another pause. "Actually, no. Not move. I only saw it sitting there on the table. Your video was so shaky I couldn't see much. Then I heard you scream, and..." Violet stopped, her voice tightening, and then I heard footsteps, like someone running, fast. "That was me," Georgia said quickly. "I dropped the phone when I saw it, but it was on the table. I swear it wasn't there before." "I believe you saw something," Violet said gently, "but it could have been the light, or maybe Ethan playing a trick." "It wasn't Ethan," Georgia snapped. "He was asleep. So was my dad." Okay, Violet said quickly. "Just try to calm down. It's late. You're freaked out. You'll feel different in the morning." "I won't," Georgia muttered. "I know what I saw." She hung up before Violet could say anything else and sat in the dim glow of her bedside lamp, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Downstairs, the house gave a low groan, wood shifting in the night. Wind rattled the window pane beside her bed. But that wasn't what was keeping her awake. She sat upright the rest of the night, eyes fixed on her door, waiting for another sound. Another of those creaking sounds, but it just didn't come. Chapter 5. Prove It. By the next afternoon, the sky was low and gray, threatening rain. The air smelled of wet leaves and smoke as Georgia trudged down the narrow path behind the old mill. Violet, Ariana, and Alicia were already there. Huddled around a cigarette Violet had lit, Charlie leaned against the wall near them, flipping a lighter open and shut, a lazy smirk on his face. Georgia dropped her bag beside them. "Thanks for answering my texts," she said dryly. Violet gave her a sympathetic look. "You okay? You look like you haven't slept." "I didn't," Georgia said. "Because of him." "Elaborate," Charlie said, arching an eyebrow. "Who's him? The creepy boyfriend or the creepy doll?" "The doll!" Georgia snapped. "I told you, it moved. It wasn't in the study anymore. I found it sitting on the kitchen table." Ariana grimaced. "That's seriously messed up." Charlie chuckled. "Yeah, okay. And I suppose it'd walk there on its little wooden legs?" "I'm not joking," Georgia barked, glaring at him. Smirked. "Didn't say you were. Just saying, maybe you were half asleep and imagined it." Violet stepped between them. "Charlie, shut up." But Georgia's voice was rising now, her hands shaking slightly. "You think I want to believe it? Do you think I like this? My parents think I'm losing it. But that thing moved, and I'm going to prove it." Charlie laughed under his breath, flicking his lighter again. "Yeah? How? What's the plan? Ask it politely to dance for you?" "Maybe I'll record it," Georgia snapped. "Maybe I'll catch it moving. Then you'll see." He leaned in a little closer, Grin infuriatingly smug. "You promise?" "I promise." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, the mill's broken windows rattling softly. Finally, Violet sighed. "All right, both of you chill. Georgia, if you really want to prove it, I'll help. We can come by tomorrow or something." Charlie snorted. "Sure. A slumber party with the possessed puppet. Count me in." "Don't," Georgia said sharply. "Don't mock it. You don't know what it's capable of." Charlie met her gaze, his smirk fading just a little, enough for a flicker of doubt to show. "It's a doll, Georgia." "Then you've got nothing to worry about," she said. Violet shot her a warning look that Georgia just grabbed her bag. "You'll see," she said, turning toward the path. "All of you will." By the time Georgia got home, dusk was already bleeding through the clouds. The Woodward house sat still and quiet, the windows catching the last of the light. Ethan was in his room playing video games. Her mother was on a late shift, and her father had gone out to a client dinner. The house was hers. Well, hers and his. The doll's. She stood in the doorway of her father's study for a long time before stepping in. Mr. Grin sat in his chair again, exactly as before. Hands on his lap, head tilted slightly to one side, the same cracked grin slicing across his face. "Go on," she muttered. "Do something." She set her phone up on the desk, camera pointed straight at him, and hit record. Then she sat cross-legged on the floor just outside the doorway, staring in through the gap. Minutes crawled by. The ticking of the wall clock grew louder the longer she listened. At one point, the light from the hall flickered, once, twice, before holding steady again. Another time, she thought she heard a faint creak from the chair, but when she looked directly at it, it was still. Once, she swore the doll's head had turned a fraction more toward the door, but when she blinked, it hadn't moved. 2 hours passed. Nothing had happened, just silence and that frozen grin watching her. Finally, she exhaled and stopped the recording. "Fine," she whispered. "Play nice while I'm watching. But I know you move." She shut the study door carefully, as though afraid to wake it, and went upstairs. It was raining by morning, thin, cold sheets of drizzle that turned the schoolyard into mud. Georgia walked in with her hood up, earbuds in, ignoring the whispers that always seemed to follow her now. At lunch, she found Violet and Ariana sitting under the covered benches, sharing crisps. Charlie was there too, flicking a bottle cap against the wall. When he saw her, his grin widened. "So, did your new boyfriend perform for you last night?" She glared at him. "Shut up now, Charlie." He leaned forward, voice dripping with amusement. "Come on, you said you'd prove it. Get any good footage of old Mr. Grin doing the hokey pokey?" Violet elbowed him lightly. "Don't, Charlie." "No, let him," Georgia snapped. "Let him laugh." Charlie held up his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm just saying, if the doll's haunted, maybe it doesn't like being watched." Her jaw clenched. "You don't get it. None of you do." "Maybe because there's nothing to get," he said, smirking. Something in her snapped. She grabbed her bag and stood up. "You'll see. I'll prove it. I don't care how long it takes." "Georgia!" Violet started, but she was already walking away, rain beating on her jacket, her fists tight at her sides. Charlie watched her go, his grin fading just slightly. He muttered after a moment. "I was only joking." But she didn't look back. That night, Georgia couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. Even as she brushed her teeth, the creaks of the old house felt heavier, as if the walls were listening. She propped her phone up again on the desk in her father's study, the camera aimed squarely at Mr. Grin. "Smile for the camera," she muttered, forcing a smirk she didn't feel. The doll just sat there, slumped a little, cracks running through the pale wood of his face, one painted eye slightly higher than the other. His grin looked deeper tonight somehow, as if someone had carved it wider. Georgia left the phone recording, light dimmed to save battery, and went upstairs. She told herself she'd stay awake, check the footage in an hour or two, but she didn't. When she woke, her room was cold, the kind of chill that made her breath fog. The clock on her nightstand said 1:42 a.m. She groaned and rubbed her eyes, then froze. Her phone was on her bedside table, still recording. Her heart began to pound. She slipped out of bed, padded barefoot down to her father's study, and opened the door. Mr. Grin sat in his chair, exactly where she'd left him. The faint glow from her father's desk lamp painted his cracked face in yellow light, and her father was there too, papers spread across the desk, a mug of coffee beside him. He looked up, startled. "Georgia? What are you doing up?" I couldn't sleep." She hesitated. "When did you come in here?" "About an hour ago. Just finishing some accounts." He glanced at the doll. "You left the light on again." "Sorry, did you see my phone?" He frowned. "Your phone?" "No, been in here the whole time." She nodded slowly. "Right. Okay." He gave her a tired smile. "Go back to bed, sweetheart. You're running yourself ragged with this thing." When she returned to her room, her hands were shaking. She sat cross-legged on her bed and opened the video. The first hour was nothing. Mr. Grin in his chair, the faint creak of the floorboards as the house settled. Then the screen went black. It stayed that way for nearly 5 minutes. When the picture came back, the camera wasn't in the study anymore. It was in her room, filming her asleep. The angle was wrong, too low, like someone small had carried it in and set it down beside her bed. She watched herself turn over in her sleep, unaware. The frame shifted once, slightly, as though whoever was behind the camera had leaned closer. She stopped the video, her mouth dry as a bone. Downstairs, she could hear her father moving, the soft scrape of his chair, the creak of the floor. She waited until the sounds stopped. Then his footsteps passed down the hall toward his bedroom. His door clicked shut. Georgia exhaled slowly, forcing herself to stand. She took her phone and crept back to the study. The doll was still there, the same twisted grin. The same empty eyes. She set the phone up again on the desk, its little red light winking in the dark, and hit record. "Let's see what you do when I'm watching," she whispered. Then she backed out of the room, closing the door halfway. The old chair creaked once behind it. Just once. Georgia waited almost 2 hours before she heard the sound. Footsteps, slow, heavy, from downstairs. Then on to the first step, then another. She held her breath, listening. Someone was walking up the stairs. She crept out of bed and out of her room. The sound stopped. The landing was empty. Her father's door was closed, the faint rumble of his snore leaking through. Ethan's room was dark, but the door to the study downstairs, the one she'd left half closed, now stood wide open. Her stomach tightened. She crept down and peered inside. Mr. Grin sat where she'd left him, but her phone, the one she'd set up on the desk, was gone. She switched on the light and searched the desk, the floor, and behind the chair. It was nowhere. "Where is it?" she whispered, looking at Mr. Grin directly. The doll stared back. For a long moment she stood there, waiting for it to move, to breathe, to do something, but it didn't. Finally, she backed away, heart hammering. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, the smell of coffee and toast dragged her downstairs. Her mother had already gone for work. Ethan sat half asleep over his cereal. Her father's voice called from the study. "Georgia? You missing something?" She froze in the doorway. He was standing by the rocking chair, pointing at her phone, resting neatly in Mr. Grin's wooden lap. "You must have dropped it," he said, handing it over. She shook her head slowly. "No, I didn't." He gave her that careful, wary look parents give when they're deciding whether to scold or worry. Well, it was sitting right there all night. Georgia unlocked the phone. The screen showed a new recording, 3 hours, 16 minutes. She swallowed. "You didn't touch this, did you?" "Why would I?" He looked up at her as she left. "Don't you think it's time you gave this a rest? You mother's getting worried about you. You aren't sleeping properly." "I'm fine," she replied without looking. She took the phone upstairs without another word. The video started with her lying in bed, the same low angle as before, as if someone small had placed the phone at her bedside again. She could see herself turning over, the faint rhythm of her breathing. Nothing else happened, no movement, no sound, but it ran for over 3 hours. When she arrived at school later, she ignored everyone, Violet, Ariana, even Charlie's mocking grin. She sat through classes without hearing a word. Her mind stuck on the empty chair and the red light of the camera. Something had moved her phone. Twice. When darkness fell, she didn't bother setting the camera up in the study. Instead, she went outside. The grass was slick with dew as she crossed the yard. The light in the study window glowed faintly above, spilling onto the garden. Inside, she could just make out Mr. Grin perched in his chair, watching the glass. She set her phone against a flower pot, camera aimed up through the window. The screen showed the silhouette of the doll and the reflection of her own pale face. "Smile for me," she whispered. She hit record and backed away into the shadows, the cold seeping through her jacket. Inside, the rocking chair creaked once, the faintest movement of wood against wood. Her breath caught. Through the phone's tiny screen, she thought she saw the doll's head turn just slightly toward the window. Then, the light inside the study went out. Her reflection vanished, leaving only the darkness and that faint, frozen grin. Georgia stayed crouched in the damp grass for nearly an hour. The glow from the study window had gone dark, the only light now the thin silver of the moon over the house. Her phone sat where she'd left it, its red recording light steady. She checked the time, 1:37 a.m. Her knees were numb, her fingers stiff from the cold. Enough, she thought. Just a few more minutes, then she'd grab the phone and check what it caught. That was when she heard it. A faint creak from inside the house, then another, rhythmic, slow, the sound of someone walking the stairs. Every step seemed to drag a little longer than it should have. She straightened up, heart thudding, eyes fixed on the upstairs landing windows. No light, no movement. But the noise kept going. Step, pause, step, then silence. She bolted for the back door, fumbling with the latch. Inside, the hallway was black and still. She could smell the faint burn of the heating system and the polish her mother used on the banisters. The door was open just a crack. She pushed it wider. The chair was there. Mr. Grin sat perfectly upright, his cracked jaw glinting faintly in the dark. But her phone, the one she'd left outside, filming through the glass, was gone. She ran to the window to check if it fell, but there was nothing on the floor outside. She turned in a circle, scanning the carpet, the shelves, the desk, nothing. Her breath came faster. No, 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 no. She dropped to her knees, checking under the desk, behind the rocking chair. Still nothing. The house seemed to breathe around her, settling timbers, whispering drafts, or something else. She froze as another sound came. A light creak on the landing above her head, like someone shifting their weight. Her eyes snapped upward to the ceiling, then the sound stopped. Georgia backed out of the study slowly, never taking her eyes off the doll. His head was angled slightly downward now, the grin catching a sliver of moonlight through the window. She shut the door and leaned against it, trying to steady her breathing. Whatever was happening, it wasn't over. And when the morning came, she'd find out what he'd done with the phone. Chapter 6. He's watching me. Morning came gray and heavy, rain whispering against the windows. Georgia barely slept. She lay awake until the first hints of light pushed through the curtains, then sat up when she heard her father call from downstairs. "Georgia, you missing something again?" She froze. Her pulse leapt painfully. She ran down barefoot, still in her pajamas. Her father stood in the doorway of the study, one hand on the chair's backrest. Her phone sat balanced neatly in Mr. Grin's lap, just like before. Mark smiled wearily. "You really have to stop leaving this thing lying around, kiddo." Her voice came out as a whisper. "But I didn't leave it there." He frowned. "Well, someone did. Probably you half asleep." But she was already unlocking the screen. The phone's storage was full. One new video. 4 hours, 12 minutes. She climbed the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring her father calling after her. In her room, she sat cross-legged on her bed, pressed play, and watched. At first, the footage showed the study window, faint moonlight reflecting off the glass. For nearly an hour, nothing moved. Just the outline of the doll in its chair. Then, without warning, the picture juddered. The camera seemed to tilt, as if picked up. The image blurred as it swung toward the darkness. It moved, jerkily, through the grass, then toward the back door. Then, the video went black. It stayed that way for almost 30 minutes. When the picture came back, the camera was inside the study, facing the doll. Her breath hitched. The frame trembled, like the phone was being carried by small, uneven hands. Then the view shifted again, up the hall, across the landing, toward her bedroom door. The video tilted one last time as it entered her room, focusing on her bed, on her, sleeping, and then the screen went black again. She dropped the phone, her heart slamming against her ribs. No, no, no. Downstairs, she heard her father talking to her mother. Their voices blurred through the floorboards. Georgia stumbled down, shaking, clutching the phone. "Dad, Mom, look at this." Mark and Vicky exchanged a worried glance as she shoved the phone toward them. They watched, Mark frowning, Vicky's hand covering her mouth. When the video ended, Georgia was pale and trembling. Mark cleared his throat. Sweetheart, there's gotta be a reason for this. Maybe you moved it in your sleep, or... I didn't, she shouted, tears in her eyes. How could I have filmed myself asleep? Look at it. Her mother turned sharply to Mark. This is enough, Mark. Look at her. She's terrified. She's not sleeping. She's losing it over that thing. He sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. It's just a doll, Vic. I don't care. Get rid of it. And you get some rest right now. I'm ringing you in sick. Vicky's tone left no room for argument. Mark gave in with a tired nod. Fine. I'll take it to the shed for tonight. Maybe to the charity place in the morning. That evening, Georgia watched from her window as her father carried Mr. Grin out of the study, tucked awkwardly under one arm like a child. The doll's head lolled against his shoulder, that split grin catching the porch light. For a split second, just as Mark stepped into the darkness, she could have sworn the mouth moved, just a twitch, showing a glimmer of teeth. She gasped and stumbled back from the glass. Hours passed. The house was still, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something outside was listening. The wind pushed softly at the window frame. Then she felt a sudden chill, sharp enough to raise goosebumps along her arms. She got up, crossed to the window. The pain had fogged slightly from her breath, and she rubbed a clear circle with her sleeve. Her heart lurched. The shed door was open, just a crack, swaying in the wind. No, she whispered. She backed away, staring at it. Maybe the latch hadn't caught. Maybe her dad hadn't shut it properly. That had to be it. Then she heard them. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate creaks, climbing up the stairs. One step, pause, another. They were heavy, but careful. Like whoever it was didn't want to wake anyone. Her throat tightened. She pushed her door open and peered into the hall. The landing light was off, shadows pooling along the walls. And there, at the very top of the stairs, sat Mr. Grin. His head was tilted forward slightly, as though he'd been watching her for a while. The cracks across his painted face caught the faint light from below, and then, with a slow, deliberate jerk, his head turned toward her. His grin seemed to widen. Her heart almost stopped. A shiver ran down her spine like an icy breeze. She screamed, loud enough to wake the entire block. Her feet pounded down the hall as she burst into her parents' room. Dad! Dad, it's him! He's inside, he's on the stairs. Mark jolted awake, sitting up fast. What? What are you talking about? Mr. Grin, he's out at the shed, she yelled in a panic. Vicky was already on her feet, throwing on a robe. Mark, please go look. He groaned, dragging himself up. Georgia, you're having nightmares again. I'm not. He moved, I swear. Mark grabbed a torch from the dresser and stepped into the hall, shining it toward the stairs. Empty. He went down carefully, checking each step, sweeping the beam along the walls. The doll wasn't there. When he opened the back door, cold air rushed in, and there, through the drizzle, he could see the shed standing open. Mr. Grin was exactly where he'd left him, slumped on the bench, that awful smile catching the torchlight. He came back upstairs, shaking his head. He's in the shed, Georgia. You must have dreamed it. I didn't. Vicky wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. Mark, I mean it. This thing is over. She's terrified. I don't care what time it is. Get it out of this house. Now. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. Ick. It's the middle of the night. Now, Mark. The tone in her voice made him stop. A few minutes later, Georgia stood at the window again, watching her father cross the garden in the rain. He carried the doll under one arm, his jacket soaked through, his breath misting in the cold. He shoved Mr. Grin into the back of his truck, muttering to himself. The porch light flickered as he slammed the tailgate shut. For a second, just, Before he turned away, she saw the doll's head tilt upward, the faintest twitch of its cracked grin widening, as if it knew it had won. Chapter 7. Don't Tell Georgia. The rain came harder as Mark pulled onto the empty country road. The truck's headlights cut through the mist, the wipers smearing streaks across the glass. In the back seat, Mr. Grin sat propped against a toolbox, his head tilted to one side, cracks gleaming faintly in the dashboard light. Mark kept glancing at him in the mirror, muttering under his breath, "Just a doll. Just a bloody doll." The wind picked up, pushing against the truck. Branches scraped the sides as he turned off onto the narrow lane that led to his storage unit. The place sat half a mile from town, an old corrugated metal row, floodlights flickering with insects. He parked, engine idling, and got out. The rain hit cold and hard. When he opened the back door to grab the doll, the seat was empty. He blinked and looked again. The tarp he'd thrown over the toolbox was still there, but no doll. What the hell? He checked the floor, the footwell, under the seat. Nothing. The door on the far side was still locked. Mark's throat went dry. He spun around, scanning the lot. Nothing moved except the rain. "Georgia," he whispered to himself. "You're messing with me somehow. You have to be." But the keys were still in his pocket, the locks unbroken. The passenger seat was empty too, except for a faint smear on the upholstery, something like streaked varnish. Mark stood there for a long moment in disbelief, rain dripping from his hair. Then he slammed the door and climbed back in, his hands shaking as he gripped the wheel. He didn't turn the radio on, didn't look in the mirrors. He just drove fast back toward home. The house was dark when he pulled into the drive. He sat there for a while before going in, wiping the rain from his face, trying to calm his breathing. Vicky was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, arms folded, robe drawn tight. Upstairs, Georgia was awake. She'd crept halfway down when she heard the door open. He hesitated, looking at each of them. Then he spoke, his voice rough. "It's done." "You got it out there safely?" Vicky asked, looking up at Georgia. He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, locked away. Not coming back." Her expression softened slightly. "Good," she said as she walked back upstairs. Mark took Vicky's arm, his voice low. "Listen, don't tell her, but it wasn't in the truck when I got there." She heard him whisper and stopped. Now she stood on the landing, hidden in the shadows, listening. "I checked everywhere. The doors were locked, I swear. I didn't stop anywhere, Vic, but when I opened the back door, nothing. Gone." She stared at him, horror rising in her eyes. "You're telling me you lost it?" "I'm saying I don't know what happened. Maybe I didn't put it in properly. Maybe it fell out somewhere. I'll go look in the morning, all right? Just don't say anything to Georgia." "Mark, please," he whispered. "She's frightened enough." They didn't realize Georgia was standing just above them, heart pounding in her chest. She backed away slowly, every step careful. Breath caught in her throat. The stairs creaked beneath her heel. Her parents looked up instantly, but by then she was gone, her door closing softly behind her. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring out at the dark garden beyond her window. The shed door swayed gently in the wind. Somewhere out there, she thought, Mr. Grin was smiling. Thank you for listening to my little story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please help support my channel. It's new, and I hope to see you again next time.